Good morning, everyone. Today is Saturday, January 23rd, 2021. My name is Karen Bodenschatz, and I serve as Associate Pastor at First Lutheran Church in Onalaska, Wisconsin, and this today is my morning musing. I was reading this morning the readings for tomorrow, which come from Mark. If you were paying attention last week during worship, or if you were worshiping with us, you know that we heard one of the call stories of Jesus calling his disciples from John. And this week we're going to hear Mark's version of that. And it's in the first chapter of Mark. It is, as you would suspect, kind of short, but it is where we get some of the language of fishers of people. So I was reading that and pondering what that means, but it's also paired with Jonah, chapter 3 in particular. So post-whale in Jonah's story, and God comes to Jonah again and says, okay, go to Nineveh. And so Jonah does. And the storyteller of Jonah tells us that Nineveh was 3 days walk, like from end to end. It would take somebody 3 days to walk across Nineveh. And so Jonah goes a 1 day's walk. So about a third of the way into Nineveh. He does not go to the center of Nineveh. There, in kind of the outskirt part of Nineveh, Jonah proclaims God's forgiveness, repent, is his message. So I was thinking about Jonah, who was a very unenthusiastic prophet for pretty good reasons. I mean, the Ninevites were horrible to Jonah's people. But I was also thinking about Mark and the way Mark tells his story of Jesus, and how for Mark, everything is urgent. And if we think about the people that Mark was talking to, these people who had just seen the temple destroyed, who were trying to figure out who they were, who needed hope, and something to get them to go and do the things that we as Christians are called to do. There's this urgency about the telling of the story. And I think when a story is told verbally instead of written down, there is that kind of more sense of urgency, because you have to keep your audience captive, right? And so I've been thinking about the urgency that I have sensed in our world around human rights issues and around justice. As I've been reading Mark, I think Mark is the perfect gospel for us to be reading this year. And then I've also been thinking about Jonah. This is what happened in my head this morning, thinking about Jonah and how lukewarm Jonah was about this whole thing. In fact, we could probably say how cold Jonah was about this whole thing, but we'll be kind and say lukewarm. And how lukewarm I have been, how lukewarm the church has been in terms of matters of justice up until about maybe 10 years ago. And that there's this sense that our calling as Christian people to love God and love neighbors means that there should always be an urgency in making sure that all people live their best life now, which sometimes looks like feeding the hungry. Other times it looks like marching for racial justice. Sometimes it looks like visiting our state representatives or our national representatives and advocating for a bill to be passed that would be more equitable. Sometimes it looks like standing up for fair wages for people, for a minimum wage that is actually a livable minimum wage. And sometimes it looks like fighting for the rights of the LGBTQIA community, for women, for children. There are so many things that are vying for our attention. And sometimes it can be so overwhelming that we just kind of back off. And other times it pulls us in And sometimes people are pulled to different things, and that's okay. But we should be pulled somewhere, friends. The time is now. I've never known a more ripe time for us as followers of Jesus to jump in with both feet. It's why we at First are doing some of these hard conversations around race and around advocacy for the LGBTQIA community. It's why we're not shying away from justice work anymore, because there is an urgency on our hearts and in our spirits that comes directly from our mandate from Jesus Christ himself to love God and love all people. But it's so easy to be like Jonah and be like, yeah, repent, whatever. Oh God, I love Jonah. I think Jonah might be my spirit animal. As much as Mary is, I suppose. But anyways, Jonah, like he just was, and then he was just so annoyed about it because he knew God would do amazing things in the hearts of the Ninevites. I think God is doing amazing things in our hearts and minds right now. So I encourage you to be a part of our 21-day challenge toward racial equity. I encourage you to ask good, curious questions about how it is that you've been in the past and what God is calling you now in the future. And I hope we can have conversations together about what that looks like and how that fits in at First Lutheran Church. I look forward to seeing you in worship tomorrow at 8 and 10:30. Until then, be well, be kind, for Christ is with you.